Greetings, this is Vivek. And today is the 16th of April. And I am on a roll, so I'm sure there will be a slight feeling of overwhelm, but that's all right. Some things just need to be said. And there's something about walking here under this awesome sky and always being aware of what people have said or written or illuminated for me in terms of something that they have, shone a light upon, etc. Something always strikes me. And as you might have noticed by now, that when things strike me, they tend to strike me like a sack of potatoes. So what struck me today was quantum uncertainty and the immiscibility of cultures. And I think that's a pretty self-explanatory headliner. Quantum uncertainty and the immiscibility of cultures. So, back sometime in the last century, early part of the last century or the late part of the 19th century, there was a physicist by the name of Werner Heisenberg. And he postulated the famous Heisenberg uncertainty principle. He was a quantum physicist. And he said that at a certain subatomic level, which means it's true for every level in this fractal world, that the very act of looking at something changes it. That the very act of observation alters the observed in such a way that you never know its true state. So any act of observation is an intrusion that changes what is into what is plus your act of observation and therefore you in that system. And he saw it at the subatomic level where you could never catch an electron in terms of knowing both its speed and its direction at the same time. You could know one or the other. So you could never place it. Which was kind of the idea. That was the wall that was hit in terms of how far down we should even try and go. When you've reached the limit of uncertainty, where there's nothing you can do to make a correct observation, I would say that's a natural barrier. Stop. Through that field, you can glean a lot of what lies below it. That is how nature is set up. But there was no need to puncture the uncertainty like we did, which essentially is, to my mind, the atomic bomb. The released energy, the strong forces in sub-nuclear regions. So the premise though is that the very act of observation alters the observed in such a way that the observer can never know the true state of what they set out to observe in the first place. Now at a subatomic level, just shining a light impacts whatever you're trying to track. And at our denser level, it perhaps takes a little more, but the principle holds. And I think this can be transferred very easily over to why, in spite of the best social engineering minds selling this concept to the world relentlessly. That it's a Benetton world, it's a Benetton world, it's a Benetton world. You know, India was overtaken. The world, in fact, at one time was overtaken by this Benetton ad blitz, wasn't it? Of people of all hues and cultures looking very happy together. Of course, they were selling body stereotypes and all of those other things along with it. But the core concept they were selling was one world, one world. But my point is that even the deepest student of an other country's culture can never know the original state of where that came from. Every cultural remnant that we see, whether it's historical architecture or historical religion or historical whatever, carries the stamp of its origin, and only people of the soil and of the place and of the air and of the originality of the language as the first thing they ever heard is something that no outsider sorry it's the same thing as reading any translated work. Even with the best of translations, you know you're missing out. So perhaps when two cultures come and meet, the best meeting is at some kind of a commonly delineated geographic border, because you're most likely to have some commonality at those points. But this monoculture that's being thrust all over the world, I mean, look at if you want to talk about looking at a fractal view of the world, the thing that's killing agriculture is called monoculture, where large tracts of land are sowed with a single crop and then chemically kept alive till they can be harvested. So monoculture is killing agriculture, and monoculture is killing multiculture in our lives. And so to my mind, this single Hollywood, MTV, game show, pushing moral boundaries, this is all pushing towards a monoculture. Individually, we can define our own morality as we choose in our own space. But it's a cultural compact that when you go out into your own world, that you will walk by certain culturally commonly decided mores. That's how the world stays peaceful. But like a massive tunneling device, that is loaded with explosives, this monoculture train, and again, and unfortunately, it's English. And English is the diamond tip of this drill. It's plugged into everybody's mind through all this media that we are constantly subject to, often whether we like it or not. And just imagine the Heisenberg uncertainty principle impact when you're not just observing this thing as gently and non-destructively as possible, you're shining a stadium like 50,000 megawatts of light on it and beaming down your messages through every channel possible into this observed populace. Right? So it's more like it's not like I'll slip into the cracks here and try and find out how we all fit and mix together. It's the food processor approach of put it all in a jar and churn it up. The net result is bound to be a lower mix when you slice and dice and hack like that. So monoculture is a danger for us as a species at every level. Think about how much the march of monoculture has added to generational friction in every country where it has found a foothold. Right? Once you have that permanent into somebody's brain, the generational gap is growing shorter and shorter. Every year there is a new fad, a new cartoon, a new doll, a new toy, a new song, a new band. And so, of course, generations are going to completely not be able to understand each other. Even dialogue in a society is so heavily based on the culture of that society. Your own inner monologues can say whatever they want, but it's the same thing like stepping out. So basically, add to this already potent mix the fact that whoever came and was wielding this, cultural mishmash sword had bad intentions anyway of controlling an alien people through subjugation, obviously, because who takes to control? It takes generations for a nation to forget. But look, even now, how that period has been shortened due to the power of propaganda. That the Japanese, who were bombed by the US with the only nuclear attacks ever, supposedly, at least openly, let's not talk about depleted uranium. And then in the aftermath with the occupation, look at Japan today. McDonald's, beef eating, massively beef eating, because USAID set up the beef channel. They had now a captive market and they control Japanese TV. So within 25 years, I think, of 1945, 6th and 9th August, the Japanese loved America again. And they are all over the US in tourist buses and so happy to be there. And their national sport is baseball. And everywhere you turn in this country of food as art, you see McDonald's and Kentucky's Fried Chicken and this fast food and that fast food. And it's happening here in India now at warp speed. The best way to raise money and start a business in India right now is to open something in retail. Doesn't matter what you're doing, food joint, franchise possibility, whatever. Because it helps to spread this monoculturalism. And you can trace the roots back, like in India, for example. So the British left their strongest stamp on the Indian Armed Forces when they left. The second strongest stamp probably was on the Indian Administrative Service. But because the Indian Armed Forces were run by the book, and the books were all written by the Brits, so even till date, our armed forces are completely moribund, throttled by regs of every sort for the Army, Navy and Air Force that the British set up and left. And they left a highly anglicizing culture. And this really struck me like a sack of potatoes when one of my partners was looking at my album, and she saw me dressed as a, as a 4-year-old, dressed in a t-shirt, shorts, socks and shoes. And she said, my God, you could have been anywhere. I mean, in 66, when I was born, she said, this is how kids would be dressing. You don't look Indian at all. And then you went from photograph to photograph and you realized, yeah, the armed forces were the ones where each house was given, each officer was given a dining table, 6 chairs, 3 sofas, 2 high beds. Talk about cultural programming. And westernization. So, children from the armed forces were much more likely to be English speaking, world aware and eager to spread their wings and go. And every manner of other mannerism, parties and alcohol and smoking, and in the British way. I mean, I'm a retired naval officer, and yet I can't go to a defense mess and light up a beedi, which is the Indian cigarette. Nobody would put up with it. No, you can only smoke white, chlorine-dipped, chemical-filled cancer sticks. Or the one time recently being a few years ago, when I went with 2 of my course mates to a defense institution here in Bangalore. And I was wearing big earrings, just for the heck of it. There was some 3 days I was wearing these huge earrings. I wanted to see what it felt like. And within 5 minutes of sitting down, the guy who manages the place comes up and says, sir, excuse me, you'll have to leave. And we said, why? I said, they said he's our course mate and he's just turned civilian some years ago. And he says, no sir, he's not as per dress regulations. I was wearing Indian style shoes. They're called Rajasthani jutis. They're very beautiful, fully covered Indian style shoes, but they weren't according to regs. And somebody in the crowd felt offended enough to tell him that man is breaking regulations, he has to leave. And I gave that little anecdote just to show the degree, the force of the programming into the English-speaking, Western, and therefore monocultural lifestyle. Lifestyle itself is a very monocultural weapon. No, all life substance is forgotten for lifestyle. So with advertising and news, which is now also complete propaganda, Heisenberg uncertainty principle comes with, 2 huge clubs in their hands, looking to observe other cultures. Hardly, right? It comes to break down that uncertainty barrier where, a natural born sense, cultural sense of a place rejects certain aspects of another place that don't belong. But unfortunately for us, the monoculture machine is really powerful. The best voices never make it. There's lots of good being said and done around the world, and all we hear is lies. Overpopulation, by the way, might be one of the biggest lies being told ever. So the quantum uncertainty principle and the immiscibility of cultures. With due apologies to people like John Woodruff and Huinsang and Herodotus and all of these famous travelers in the old days who came and genuinely learned the language and lived with the people and married maybe, but still there are certain things that are not meant to mix. And in places where they can mix then, which might be, let's say, the fusion points, as in music or art, a natural mix, it'd be fantastic. It adds a halo to wherever these two cultures might connect. And since the net or the web gives us such infinite connectivity, maybe that's where it was meant to start. Meet at the border of uncertainty of two cultures and see what magic comes, instead of trying to drive a chainsaw through the weaker one. So you can own that collective mind. And a word I've dwelt on often, but I want to say again as my English word of the day etymology dive, is the word convenience. So convenience is con and venue. Con with venue, the etymological root is coming together to do great harm. And look at this world of convenience that we live in, and the altar of convenience that we all bow to. It's all technologically derived convenience. It may be convenient, but it may not be good. In fact, usually not good. Coming together to do great harm. That really says something. And the other word that actually is very important, given that it's so much in the global discourse, is government. 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 Ment as in mentation, mentality, thinking, mind. So government is the control of the mind. And that's my recording for April 16th. I hope it all made sense. Be well. Till next time, Namaskar.